Chinese businesses do very well is that they are able to burn down the cost of innovation. What I mean is they are able to reduce the cost of innovation and reduce the timelines for innovation across a variety of sectors. Well, my first advice for Chinese businesses would be that I think going overseas and expanding presence in Global South markets is a win-win solution because Chinese innovative products, including consumer products, have markets that are possible in the Global South. Yeah, so you are right that global trade flows are actually changing for a long time now. This trend has been going on for the last 8 to 10 years. One part of it is that trade between US and China has been declining over the last several years, and trade between China and the other countries of the Global South has been growing very, very rapidly. So in BCG, we built a global trade model to try to understand what the next 10-year forecast will look like. And we have a few learnings from that. The first one is that we think that trade between China and the other countries of the Global South will grow almost 6% per year. That is twice as fast as global trade, because global trade is growing at about 2.9% per year. So this is 2 times as fast as that. Second, we think South to South trade, which is emerging Global South countries with each other, that trade is also going to grow over 5.6% per year. And those are the new trade lanes that are being formed. And so we are seeing also the BRICS expanding. We are seeing that the BRICS are now not just a big part of the global population and GDP. If Saudi Arabia joins the BRICS, BRICS will also be a big part of oil production of the world. So that makes the BRICS a very powerful voice for the Global South as well. So I see a lot of good developments here, and we see that China and the Global South is very closely integrated, and you see a lot more South to South trade because of that. So that is actually something very welcoming and very positive that we have seen more recently. In the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen more Chinese companies with the aspiration to become multinationals. Of course, there were a lot of Chinese companies in tech, Huawei, for example, who has really expanded overseas many, many years ago. But now we are seeing Chinese companies in FMCG, in consumer durables, in consumer products with aspirations to go overseas. I work a lot in the Global South markets, and we are seeing the presence of Chinese multinationals in the Global South as well. So we feel that's a positive trend, because what it's doing is creating more opportunities for consumers in these countries, and it's creating more variety and more choices for consumers in the Global South. So I do think this trend will continue as China pivots more and more towards the Global South, and I think it's a positive movement. That's a very interesting and I think a very relevant question. What we are seeing is that one of the things that Chinese businesses do very well is that they are able to burn down the cost of innovation. What I mean is they are able to reduce the cost of innovation and reduce the timelines for innovation across a variety of sectors. Because of that reason, I'm actually quite interested to see how AI innovation evolves in China. In fact, we have done a publication called Geopolitics of AI, where we have looked at AI superpowers and AI middle powers. So there are 2 AI superpowers as per us. One is the US and the other is China. And if you look at the comparison head, and of course now there are a few AI middle powers, which includes Europe, UAE, etc. But let me come to US and China. US, of course, has AI dominance on the back of over $200 billion in R&D. US also has talent from all over the world AI talent that comes to the US. And US has over 45 gigawatts of what they call computing power. But China is closing the gap pretty quickly. China has today about 20 gigawatts of computing power. China's talent is really closing the gap. If you look at the STEM graduates from China, it's one of the top STEM graduates in China. China is also closing the gap in terms of high quality of AI publications and IP. So if you look at the number of cited publications on AI, China is number 1 in recent times. And the second factor that we look at is the dollar investment in China. So from the private sector, there has been $60 billion of investment in AI in the last 4 or 5 years. plus another 110 billion that is coming from venture capital, including government-backed venture capital. So that means China is very close, closing the gap in AI, and we do watch very closely how this might pan out. One other point that I will make is that China has also created what I call good enough innovation in AI, using older semiconductors, older technologies to be able to really create good enough outcomes in LLMs. Of course, DeepSeek, but also Qwen and many other products coming out of China. On green, I think China always had a strong position and leadership in green, together with Europe, together with the United States. And I'm not a deep specialist in green tech as much as I know about AI. But I do think that China, with the solar power investment, with wind power investment, with renewables, etc., has an advantage, and at least what I've seen from the Chinese government is continued investment in green technologies. Great question. There are actually many differences between the Chinese ecosystem and the US ecosystem. If you just look at the funding that comes, the R&D funding that comes in AI, in the US, it's driven by the big tech companies, by the private sector companies. And they then try to protect their IP. They try to, use that as first mover advantage in order to drive innovation. What you're seeing in China is it's a combination of private sector, but also significant public sector investment, which I talked about was the VCs backed by Chinese government. So the nature of the investment that comes in order to create that foundational IP, to create that innovation and that R&D is different. The second point of difference is the importance of the universities. So the Chinese AI ecosystem is anchored by the Tsinghua University that is working with the private sector to create that ecosystem of innovation. And that model is also foundationally different from how the US has evolved, again anchored by the large companies and large investment. The third thing that is interesting is working with lower budgets, lower investment, and older semiconductor technology. If you compare head-to-head between DeepSeek and some of the innovations, trying to create an AI LLM solution that uses less cutting-edge semiconductors and provides good enough outcomes on the back of that. So innovating with limited budgets sometimes, or limited time. And those LLMs don't take as much time to test and to deploy as what the US LLMs have. So the models are very different. And actually each model has its own strengths. Well, my first advice for Chinese businesses would be that I think going overseas and expanding presence in global South markets is a win-win solution because Chinese innovative products, including consumer products, have markets that are possible in the global South. The second advice I would say is to continue to drive innovation and continue to drive low-cost innovation that allows the products to be easily accepted in markets where the consumer's ability to pay is not as high. I would also say something in Chinese businesses which applies, actually I say to global businesses right now, I think it's important to build resilience in your business right now. We are seeing a lot of volatility and a lot of complexity in the world. So I think building more buffers is a smart idea. The last thing I would say, which we also advise to businesses all around the world, is to build what I call a geopolitical muscle. That means that many businesses around the world don't understand geopolitics and they don't understand the impact of geopolitics on their businesses. What we call geopolitical muscle is, first, it's a radar to be able to really understand how the policy is shifting around the world and what is happening and anticipate changes before they happen. The second is what we call a geopolitical command center. That means a team of people who can reflect on the geopolitics and then take appropriate strategies that allow you to pivot in line with the geopolitical risk.